Hi, and welcome to Elevate Your Wellbeing. It's so lovely to have you here for our 59th session. And today we're speaking on, or we're looking at, how to break bad habits. So, last time I spoke with you, we were looking at how to harness healthy habits. And the two go so well together because in order to harness healthy habits, we need to be really focusing on how to break those bad habits and replace them with the healthy habits that we looked at last time. Let me know as you're coming in what healthy habits you have been able to accomplish since the last session we had on this. And I don't know about you, but let me know whether you're here so that helps me, even if it doesn't help you. It's just lovely to know who I'm speaking with. So check in just with a love heart or a thumbs up to let me know you're here. It's great to see you. Hi, David. Great to see you from up in Nelson Bay, and looking forward to hearing more from others. So what do you think of when we think about bad habits? I, for one, want to put my hand up and say I have many. Hi, Margaret. Great to see you today also. So I have a bad habit of being late, and for those of you who are on these sessions, you would know that when you come in at 11 and I might get there at 1 minute past. I was so conscious of wanting to break my bad habit of being late that I've had it for decades. And so I just want to put my hand up for saying I'm still overcoming stuff. I still have work to do in this area, even though I'm speaking on it. But I have been successful in a lot of things. And I'm going to start by talking about the thing I'm still working on, which is my lateness. But the things that I have accomplished, I'll talk about in a minute. So, it's not your strong point either, Margaret. Thank you for letting me know I'm not on my own here. I was so conscious of this bad habit that I think had been, no blame here, but I'm thankful for all the genetics that I've gotten from my dad. But I think this one I got from him as well. And so on my wedding day, you can imagine as he was driving with me in the car to the church to walk me up the aisle, I thought, here are two people, the two most important people at the beginning of the service walking up the aisle. I thought, two people who lack punctuality, we're not going to go well here. And I was determined to be on time for my husband, to honor him and show him how much I loved him and wanted to spend the rest of my life with him, that I said to Dad, we have got to arrive at that church 15 minutes early. And we'll just drive around the block. And sure enough, we must have done about 16 trips around the block in order to let everyone else arrive at the church. But that was how important it was for me not to be late on my wedding day. So what comes to your mind when you think of bad habits? John's theme song in our first year of marriage, for those of you who are our age and older, you probably remember the song, Bad Habits, simply got so many bad habits. Well, John's theme song in our first year of marriage, when the rubber hits the road in your first year, he'd have his first challenges with somebody, he didn't have that much accountability in his life before, actually, and he owns up to this himself, so I'm not telling any stories out of outside of home. But he would sing the theme song, I've got so many minor bad habits. He just saw them as minor. So how do you get around your bad habits, like trying to treat them as small or minimizing them in your mind? Or do you actually hit them face on and say, hey, I'm going to really face this. I'm going to really work at getting rid of them. Think of a habit you'd like to break. Any habit. Just choose one. We just want to work on one at a time. We may need to let go of a habit that first served us well in our life. It may have been useful in our childhood, but it no longer serves us now. Habits can take from 30 to 140 days to break. It's not that long if you're thinking you've had this for decades. If you've only had a habit for a shorter time, you'll break free from it much more easily than the 30 to 140 days. There's an analogy here I'd like to draw on, and it's from Jay Shetty, and he talks about 5 horses. You think of 5 horses and a horse charioteer. So the charioteer is the driver. And the 5 horses represent the 5 senses. And as you know, the 5 senses are seeing, hearing, smelling, touching, and taste. So the horse of taste, if you think of that, that was my addiction to the sense of taste. I had an addiction to the sense, to carbohydrates, okay? I just loved carbohydrates. I grew up eating half a loaf of fresh bread. My brother's here online. He will attest to it because he ate the other half of the loaf. When we'd come home, we're both fairly sporty, and after team sports, after school, we'd come home and literally we would eat half a loaf of bread. And fresh bread, after we were really, we exercised well, we were famished. And my sense of taste had grown up with this attachment to bread and potatoes, which is the same for my brother. And I had a complete wiring to carbs. My sense of taste had built up with that attachment. It was good feelings coming home from doing these great team sports or swim training. And the more our senses are exposed to an object that's got a good feeling, we get attached and addicted to something that's not necessarily helpful for us in our long term. And in my childhood, that charioteer didn't have the ability, the driver, me, didn't have the ability to hold the horse back, to hold my taste back, my sense of taste. And Mum didn't hold me back either, as I was super hungry and bread was a cheap option to deal with. She knew I'd always eat my dinner only 2 hours or 1.5 hours later. So it didn't concern her. This was a family trying to save money, and bread was cheap, and that was how I was fed, and I just got into it each afternoon. And so being exposed to that, I was getting attached to fresh bread and building up an addiction to carbs, and also a problem with having an extended enlarged stomach that developed this enormous capacity for food, which I have had to work on later in life and really seriously. So that was my problem. What has one of your senses gotten attached to that hasn't been healthy for you? It might be seeing, it might be your sight with bad images that you get attached to and have some longing to. That might be with porn, for example. It might be hearing, your sense of hearing, with gossip, getting attuned and feeling warm and fuzzy inside when you tend to know about other people and slip that out with your tongue. It might be a whole stack of things, but it's related to your senses. I'm just going to look at what Margaret's saying. I have to turn this around because am I facing the right way? Can someone give me feedback? Because I just have to read this sideways. My wedding day was the only day to my super punctual day. Dad's huge request with Margaret, who's talked about her lack of punctuality, and she made it much to her dad's delight. And David saying, no, I just finished off what you couldn't fit in. Good on you, David. So he's saying I would have eaten the whole loaf. Well done, mate. That was very kind of you to just, be the second person to finish off. Ha ha. So whatever sense you have that got addicted to something, we need to look at pulling those horses, the senses, in. The reins that the driver holds is the mind, okay? The reins. The driver, you, are the intelligence behind this whole charioteer. So the intelligence, we, the driver, we're holding the mind, the reins, to train the horses, our senses. So when temptation comes, remember the saying, out of sight, out of mind. We need to remove our senses from the very thing that we're tempted with. It's up to us, the intelligence within the driver holding the reins. So removal is part of the key here. And if you want to remember this talk, you can remember it's all to do with R's. I'm going to be speaking about removal right now, and then I'm going to be looking at 3 things that can help us how to remove, and it's research, it's reward, result, and replacing. So let's look at removal first. David's saying, you're in the side of my TV, but it's a new sound. Okay. So let's look at removing the carbs from my senses. There's no bread in the house. I had to move the attachment I had to bread. I had to remove it out of sight, out of smelling range. I was hopeless going in to bread, fresh bread places, bakeries. I would just want to buy the lot, come out. I could never work in a place like that. So I had to remove all the bread. We used to have a bread making machine, gave that away. It was no good for me. I'd just eat the whole loaf as soon as I cooked it. So I had to remove it in order to stop my senses from being triggered. What little addiction or attachment do you have, or have you had, that you've been able to conquer? Let's look at that first. What attachment have you had, one of your senses has had, that you've been able to conquer so it no longer became an addiction, or you got rid of it before it became an addiction? It might be having had a propensity to be anxious, being habitually late, as we've talked about, being lazy. Just put it in the chat box. Anything that you have had an attachment to that's been unhealthy. Might be not taking self-responsibility, having a tendency to blame others for things that you actually have done yourself. It might be watching too much TV or interacting on social media and wasting the hours away. I'd love to hear from you on what you've already been able to change and how did you overcome it. So Margaret's written chocolate. Yes. Have you overcome that, Margaret? Can you just have it as a tiny treat, say once or twice a week, or is it still an everyday thing? Put it in the chat box. And if you're on the replay, just press #replay and please answer the same questions, because it's really helpful for others as we engage. So there's 2 here with chocolate. Yeah, and I'm one of those as well, carbs and chocolate. So when we call it an addiction, or at least acknowledge it's an unhealthy attachment that we have to an object, we have so much more power to be able to break the bad habit. The bad habits we have start off as an attraction towards something, and then it leads to an attachment, and before long it becomes an addiction. Sorry, the sun's really glaring, and I'm just going to get that glare out of my eyes. Okay, so the addiction, or the strong attachment that first starts off as a simple attraction, what is it for you? Often now, probably one of the most common addictions on this planet is the addiction to social media and porn, and to stop those sorts of habits, it's a visual thing, right? Seeing photos of people, wanting to be in the know, being fearful of FOMO, fear of missing out. We need, if we've got too strong an attachment to social media, for example, we need to stop that habit of using our phone, and we need to remove our phone and put it in another room, for example. Margaret's saying, yes, by monitoring my daily intake, the same time daily after dinner. Okay, so yeah, so you're still doing that daily after dinner, and it's up to us to choose whether that's healthy or not, to still have even a small pattern of it, or do we want to move it towards just having it as an odd occasional treat? So it's just the same with anything towards that object. If we're too strongly attached to it, we need to starve our senses from the object, to starve our senses from it first, so that then our sense can come back, whether it's sight or hearing or taste or whatever, to bring that back to a sense of neutrality. So just as you need to know the deep meaning, remember I spoke last time about knowing the deep meaning in order to build a good habit, we need to understand the deep meaning of why we want to eradicate a bad habit. So discover the significant meaning behind why you don't want to continue the habit. You might want to start with writing down reasons, 10 reasons why, and come to that deep, significant reason. If it's eating with overeating, as it was for me, stop stuffing your face and face your stuff. I found that a really helpful phrase to explore the underlying reasons for why you've developed these unhealthy internal patterns, whether it be overeating for comfort or for boredom, or to avoid the tough stuff in life, or anesthetizing yourself from heartbreak and pain. It's very common for people who've gone through separation and divorce to put on so much weight afterwards. Or some people might lose a lot of weight under that stress. Whatever it is, if it's unhealthy for us, how can we go about removing it? But before we actually remove the temptation, think about what you need to add to your life, to bring into your life, before you eliminate the bad. You want to have the replacement right there as an easy go-to when you feel that emotion of pain or needing comfort. So if the addiction's connected with your taste buds, for example, as it was for me, I had to, in a practical way, position all these healthy fresh food containers at eye access in my fridge, eye access, with prepared carrot and celery sticks and hummus, to then have a replacement for all the chocolate treats that I would have there. And then I just would not go down the chocolate aisle. Okay, I'd stay away and go just to the outside of the market that has all the fresh fruit and veggies, outside of the supermarket. So removal and replacement are key here. If you want to, I was going to say something else about just the sense of removal and how, that's right, if it is eating for overcomfort, there's a whole lot of other things you can do besides replacing food objects. I decided I would just put in an easy access a devotional book that I could go to for comfort and receive nurture and comfort from my God who loves me. And in that way, that nurture was replacing the nurture I was ridiculously choosing by going to the fridge, because it's such a superficial temporary form of nurture. It's over and done within a few minutes, whereas having a devotion was more life-giving and meaningful and sustaining for me. And so, you know, that's become a really good habit too that I replaced with the bad one. So in another example, if you wanted to remove the temptation of sleeping in, we need to remove the temptation of staying up late. And so it's looking at that. What do we do beforehand that makes us have that bad habit afterwards? So it's a system that you can use forever. These are tools on how to break your own very bad habits, or just slightly bad habits, just whatever you want to improve on. A wise person once said, give a person food, feed them for a day. But if you teach them how to make food, you feed them for life. So you are learning how to build and break habits for life. So ask yourself, how do you remove the temptation you're attached to? Just put in the chat box, how have you removed temptations that you have had in the past? We've all got them. We're all human. The places, what are the places? These are some tips here. What are the places that might elicit the bad habit within you? Or the people that bring the bad behavior out of you? And the projects that trigger the bad habit that you don't want to feed anymore. The 3 habits, the bad people, or bad people that bring on those bad habits for you, and the projects that trigger the habits you don't want to feed anymore. If it's places, you can choose not to go there anymore. That's fairly simple. If it's people, you may not be able to remove that person, but you can remove the feeling about that person. And although that's too complicated to deal with here, just in a quick session, I deal with it in great detail in the Freedom Through Forgiveness workshops and the Elevate Your Wellbeing workshops. I deal with that in full there. You can just go onto my website if you want to focus on that more fully. But for now, just ask yourself, who is watering the weed in your life of your bad habit, in the life of your bad habit? Who is watering it? Does the environment you choose to live in make it easy for you to create good habits and to break your bad ones? You see, changing habits requires us to assess the neighborhood we're living in. We all live in certain neighborhoods, and often we think that we have no control of that, but we actually do. Changing habits requires us to assess the neighborhood we're living in. We can choose who we hang out with. Only last week, this really struck me in a very tangible way. We've been helping our daughter look for a house to buy, and a nice looking one came up in her price range. And at the open house, you know, with the way the current market is, there were at least 20 people queued outside the front door to get into the house to sign in first with the real estate agent. And all of a sudden, we heard this screech in the driveway next door with yobbos angrily calling out, "Shit neighborhood!" And then 20 or so of us just burst into hysterics. And then as we looked around the neighborhood, there were just terrible things happening as well down that. There was an alleyway that, of course, wasn't disclosed on or shown on as we looked online at this house. And so it was just really, really funny knowing here's this nice enough house inside and out, but the neighborhood was not pleasant at all and had people that, you know, were doing it tough, obviously. But is that going to be replenishing if you're wanting refuge in your home and around the environment of you? So we've been looking at the people around us we need to foster to be able to change our habits. We might be putting 100% into changing our habits to becoming the best version of ourselves we can be, but we need the right supportive group of friends to motivate us and support us and inspire us and challenge us to keep on track. Speaking of that, welcome Kathy, it's good to have you here too. So we've just been putting in what habit we want to change, or what habit have we successfully overcome, and the things that you have done to enable that to happen. So just put that in the chat box if you'd like. That's really encouraging for others, Kathy. So we need to build up the right supportive group of friends to be able to support us in getting rid of bad habits. So find a tribe that will support you giving up bad habits so you can leave room for making good ones. Because you see, a good habit is like a seed. A bad habit is like a weed. I love gardening, and I want my seeds and seedlings to get water and sunlight, but I don't want the weeds to get any food, as in sunlight, for them to grow. So I have to put weed mat down. And awareness is the first step to breaking a habit. So how do we diminish the sunlight and food, the nutrients, from getting into the weeds, the bad habits that we already have in our life? Once you've identified it, build a guard at the door of your bad habit. That's why it's good to be identifying it here to support each other, and just, whatever little bad habit you want to work on, it helps with your accountability. So how do you build a guard at the door of your bad habit? There's 3 ways, and they all start with R. First one, research. Discover the extremity of what that bad habit does for you in the long term. Write down all the reasons you can find for why that habit is bad for you. Ask yourself, if I don't change this habit, what will my life look like? If your habit is overthinking, ask yourself, what will it do to my mind and soul in the long run if I continue this pattern of overthinking everything? Might be being a helicopter parent. It might be just going into negative thinking straight away rather than looking at the positive side, the constructive side of things. What research can you do to amplify the meaning of why you want to get rid of this bad habit? Write down all the bad things, the bad outcomes associated with that bad habit that will make your life more miserable if you continue it. And the second R, it's kind of 2 that are similar here, and it's reward and results. So if it's giving up smoking or excessive fats and sugars, for example, your reward could be, I'm going to live 10 years longer. Look up all the research that tells you that. Actually find the results of giving up those bad things that you're putting into your system. Show yourself with the research that you'll be a much happier, contented person if you don't have all these sugars that are making you go up on highs and then direct lows and affecting your mood and your energy levels. That tell yourself that you will be a much more vibrant person and energetic and fitter person to be able to play with your grandchildren. All of these things help. Write it down and have an accountability little book beside your bed. If you've got a bad habit of going to bed late and struggling to get up when you're supposed to in the morning, ask yourself, what is a good result of getting up earlier in the morning? And I'm going to ask you now just to put in the chat box any good result you can come up with getting up earlier in the morning. My body likes to sleep in, and I have had to train my body to get up earlier. And one of the most helpful things for me is by doing exercise earlier in the morning. I used to do this when I was, working full time, and get up early in the morning to do that exercise. And I'd have a friend at the door who found it easier to get up. And, the knocking on the door, when I knew that was coming, I knew I had a responsibility not to let her down. So that was my way of getting up earlier, doing something in the earlier morning, seeing the sunrise, and getting out there and cycling. So it's about getting that accountability, getting those good results. Kathy's saying joining groups of like-minded friends to exercise and dance with. You're not very motivated by yourself, but you tend to prefer to be sedentary or procrastinate about exercise. Good on you, Kathy. That's all about awareness, knowing what your limitations are, but jumping that hurdle to overcome those limitations by having a supportive accountability friends to help you along that pathway. Thanks for sharing that. That is so important and vital. So we know if we wake up earlier, not only are you going to get those extra things done, you're going to feel so much better because sunrises are gorgeous. I don't do sunrises every morning. I'm lucky if I do a sunrise once a week, but at least I've factored that into my life to enjoy the beauty of nature in those early wee hours of the morning. But then the other mornings, you can try and reward yourself by just telling yourself, researching the benefits of how you are more effective in the morning when you're fresh after a good night's sleep rather than at the end of the night and staying up late. Because research will tell you that you are so much more efficient at the end of the day rather than the beginning. And research will also tell you that those hours of sleep before midnight are much more conducive to deep sleep than later in your sleeping pattern. So look at the results of changing your bad habits and the results of staying in them, of the detrimental effect that will have on your life, and the rewards of changing them to be more constructive, good habits. What are you going to replace them with? So let's look at that third R now, replacing. What is the substitute going to be for you? Find a replacement that satisfies you. You can't get rid of a habit unless you replace that habit with something else. For example, my replacement with getting rid of all these carbs, once I'd gotten rid of bread continually for a while in the freezer, and not buying fresh bread for about a month, because I would have 2 slices of toast every morning for breakfast, which, starting off with carbs, isn't that the best healthy approach. So my replacement of 2 slices of toast for breakfast was so much more delicious when I started thinking sensibly about this. It was delicious yogurt, a touch of muesli and oat bran, and my favorite fruits, raspberries and passion fruit. And so I would treat myself to those favorite fruits. Sure, it was more expensive than 2 slices of bread, but it was just so much more healthier for me to start the day in that way. And that's my pattern, it's my habit, like cleaning my teeth now. So it's replacing the old and the bad with the good and the new and the healthy. If there's a tendency for you to procrastinate in bad habits, in getting rid of your bad habits, know that you're not alone. It happens to us all. So we need to break the habit of not moving, of not acting, of not moving to change. So force yourself to show up. Showing up stops procrastination. Act on your decision. Make a decision to take action and tell someone about it. You could make a decision to take action by telling us right now about what you're going to do to change that bad habit of yours. And be great for you to write that in the comments section now. So you might want to sign up for a course. You might want to get a friend to continually meet you for exercise. You might want to tell a friend just what you are going to stop putting into your diet. You might want to decrease your anxiety. So every time you find yourself worrying, you might replace those worried thoughts with gratitude. 3 things that you are grateful for. Or you might want to do a 1-minute meditation right in that moment to stop yourself from worrying. This, just a little flick on your wrist, can help you to stop that worried thought and ask yourself what's the worst thing that's going to happen. And then to change it into gratitude and a moment of meditation right on the spot. And then to develop daily habit of meditation and mindfulness, or a nature walk. All of those things clear your mind to get rid of what I call stinking thinking or overthinking that leads to anxiety. So let me see what you've said here. Margaret said exercising in aqua classes with others after initially stretching upon awakening and keeping your worn out knees manageable, and doing walking and other days with a friend as will help balance your exercise and life. So you can see how Margaret's got a structure there to help get rid of those bad habits and move them into constructive ones. So I want to encourage you as we finish to just understand that letting go of bad habits is hard, but holding on to a bad habit is much harder. Letting go is difficult, but holding on to it is painful. So remember, everything in life is a lesson and an opportunity for us to grow. So how are you going to grow as a result of this session? What is just one thing you want to do as a result of listening to this session? I encourage you to make a decision, put it in the comments section, and take action. So wonderful for you to be here, and thank you for writing down your actual change of action step, because that will encourage others, and that's what we're all about, elevating our well-being, elevating others' well-being as we join with them in this contagious care group. So until next time, be courageous, be life-giving, and be a lighthouse, and let your own very own light shine.